I think we should about be getting started, just keeping in mind the time that we have with the Zoom meetings. So, firstly, I want to say thank you to everybody that's here. Thank you for making it today for our very first guest speaker. Just to briefly go over the format for today, after our initial introduction, the guest speaker will go over a presentation. She'll do the resume walkthrough with some of the resumes that were submitted earlier through Google Docs. And after we do the resume walkthrough, there were some questions as well that were submitted for Tiffany. So she'll be able to answer those for us. What you'll also find is at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you might be able to see a reactions button where you can raise a virtual hand. So given depending on the time constraint, if you have further questions, Tiffany might be able to answer those. So in saying that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker, Tiffany Dado. She is a senior resume writer and a career coach. All of last year and right up until early this year, she was my mentor. That's how I met her. And she has a fantastic background. She has experience in journalism, in eco-psychology, and I believe she is going to be very valuable today for us, especially for people who are career changers like myself coming into the design world. So with that being said, I'm going to hand this over to Tiffany and she will take it from there.
Hello. So the intention for me today is to share with you 3 things to consider when designing your resume. And once I'm able to share my screen, I can kind of dig into that a little bit more with you. My intention is, in fact, to be a cross-pollinator of ideas. So I will be able to share insights with regarding different things that I have noticed. These are things that have worked, things that I've noticed that haven't worked. You've already heard a little bit about my background, so the key thing that I'm going to share with you is just that I'm going to be sharing these ideas. It's not like there's a one-size-fits-all answer to anything, but we're definitely going to get you information so that you can make the right choice for you. Now, with that, we do have a little bit of an agenda. I've decided I am going to sprinkle a little bit of demonstration with some of the resumes that I've received. I've blocked out names to protect privacy, just so that you have a heads up with that. And we're going to walk through, if you're going to do a screenshot, this is a good one to take. The 3 things that I do recommend considering when you're laying out your resume is, in fact, the layout, the keywords, and the audience. And then at the end of all of this, I'm going to take the first few questions that have already come in, and we're going to talk a little bit more about different strategies to use and go in more in depth into the questions that you also have beyond the ones that have been submitted. And this is a good screen also to take a picture of. So my intent with going through these 3 things to consider is this is going to set the tone for the rest of your document. The layout, the keywords, and the audience are all key factors into whether or not you're going to get a callback from your resume, because that's the whole point, is you're going to get an interview out of this. So I would like to go through kind of why they matter, what you can do about it, and how to test if you're on the right track. So starting off with, in fact, the layout. So I do have a few volunteer resumes. What are some of the things that people are noticing about this resume? What are the first 3 things that you notice? Looking at this whole document and being able to list exactly what you're noticing, and I would say probably the first 3 things, that's going to be helpful for what else you're going to see when we go through some key factors in the presentation. So as you're noticing, as you're making note of what you noticed about that resume, What I want to impress upon you is that the content placement matters. The reason is that recruiters, with all the people that they have applying to the different roles that they have available, they have about 6 seconds on average, maybe as much as 7 seconds. If they really like the content that they've seen in those 6 or 7 seconds, they may take as many as 30 seconds to look over everything you send, cover letter, resume. So how you format it matters. That's the use of bold, where you put the content. And the way to test if this is actually working, I recommend, is actually to monitor and track your applications and then go back every 4 to 6 weeks to see, did you get an interview? Did you get a lot of rejections? Once you know that you've gotten either a lot of rejections, I would say 40% or more, that's too many. From that point on, you want to look at how you're laying out, how you're tailoring your resume. But if you are getting interviews, then you know that you're effective in how you lay this out. Now, this is from a master coach who had a resume writing agency. This is an HR tested resume, so the layout was ideally in line with where the recruiters were looking when they scanned the document. It was easy for them to take in the information and be able to decide whether or not this person was qualified to call back. This probably not is as exciting a layout if you're a designer as you'd want to send out. At a certain point, you'd want to probably add a little pop of color, maybe some icons or some different elements like that. What's important to realize when you're laying that out is where a recruiter is looking. So there is research, it's regarding the ways that their eyes track across the document, that shows that it's kind of in an F or maybe even in an E formation. So where you lay out your content, your most critical content, at the top and along the left margin is very important. Sometimes somewhere in the middle, but all the rest of the stuff, namely right in this area right here, probably not an area they're going to see. So if they don't see what they want to see in these areas, it's probably not going to get the traction that you're hoping for. So now that you're thinking about that, if we were to go back and look at the same layout, what would you change? Make note of 3 things that you would change, because this might influence how you do your layout as well. Maybe even you have your resume in front of you. That could be helpful. So when it comes to the second thing I recommend considering, it's the keywords. For the most part, especially with some of the questions that came in, UX design is the key focal point. So where do you find these keywords? Clearly, it's going to be in the job description, but it's specifically going to be the job title. Because if you call yourself a visual designer and the role is for UX designer, they're going to search their database for UX. And that means they may not be able to find you. The other area to look would be the qualifications or the requirements section of the job description. Because there's a lot of tools and skills in there, we're going to look at an example of that coming up here shortly. And then one of the things that you could do to test how effective you are in getting your point across and including different keywords is to run through an applicant tracking system yourself. Jobscan.co is a free one that I like to use. It's free to a point, but at least you get one good scan and you know whether or not you have all the keywords in there. Now, when it comes to looking at keywords, I broke out this generic UI UX job description from a website. And in particular, I want to look at the requirement section. It kind of goes 3 deep for me. The first layer is all the technical tools that you might be using, like we've got wireframing, InVision, Illustrator, and Photoshop. Those are things that if you know them, you should put them in your resume because they're likely to be looked for by the recruiter, by the hiring manager. The second layer are the soft skills. So that could include communication skills, the ability to collaborate, working with stakeholders, even time management. Interestingly enough, they hyphenated it. But these are key things to also consider after you get the main tools and technologies into your document. A couple of other things, the third layer, is what you want to show rather than tell. Proven work experience. That's going to come up in some of the questions that I know that everybody's asked, as well as like showing your knowledge. You want to make sure to not just say, hey, I know all these things and I can do them, but illustrate how you can do them. Part of it's your portfolio. Part of it's how you talk about the different projects that you have going on. That's going to help them to see the value in your work and know that you can do the job. And you got to do this all from your resume. So the keywords are very much an important piece. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do is I was looking at a job scan. So I ran one of the resumes through the ATS using that generic job description that we were looking at briefly earlier. And some of the keywords did not shine through. Like it did indicate that it found the UX design. It did indicate that it found that it was a junior level role and it was a junior level resume. So some of those things can affirm what you're hoping to find and that you're on the right track in terms of the layout and the content and what you're presenting from your experience. Now, the other thing to consider is your audience. The first point of contact depends on how you deliver your resume. If you're networking, maybe you're giving the resume to the hiring manager first. If you're applying, it's definitely going to go through the applicant tracking system first. Even job boards have an ATS. And then after the ATS, in the middle of all of that is the recruiter, and they'll be looking at the document as well. So some things to consider as you're thinking about the audience who's going to take in your resume. One part is the computer system. That's where the keywords come through. The layout in this case is going to matter. Why does it matter? Because if you have a bunch of text boxes or even a table, that could impede how the computer takes in your information and pre-populates an application for you. So it could basically jumble everything up when that's not your intent. The recruiter may not actually be a designer. So they don't know how hard it was for you to put everything together, but they do know what they like to see. So they're going to be looking for keywords, yes, but they're also going to be trying to gauge if you're going to work well with the rest of the team. So they're looking for culture fit, especially when they're interviewing. The hiring manager, so this is my icon for a boss. The hiring manager is looking for you to show your work because of all the things people tell them they could do. They need to be able to see, how did you get there? How did you refine your work? So showing design thinking and iterative design is good, and the evolution of your project is going to be important. Now, I have worked with somebody in particular who they took it and they were networking, and the hiring manager looked at their work and said, "This is exactly it. We're so excited. This is exactly what we want to see. Your portfolio is perfect. You don't have to change anything." They sent the material to the recruiter. The recruiter talked to the person and says, "Nobody wants to look at this. There's not enough bling in this." So you have like all these different audiences you're trying to get your message across to. So what's important to know about this is you might have to have two resumes. One is something very simple in terms of layout, just text only. And that's going to be for the applicant tracking system so that you can get through the system. But when you're networking, you might, and from your portfolio, you might be handing out a design version that's a little more reflective of what you can do as a designer. And that is already leading me into the questions that some of you have asked. So here's my shorthand list of the key questions that were asked and these short form answers of them. But I will definitely talk through all of them. So somebody asked, what do you do if you have no experience? Very good question. So the short answer is to focus on the transferable skills that you have. There's a reason why you feel like you can do the job. It's very important that you tell them, hey, I can do this job and here's the reasons why. If you have done projects, say you've done no work history, you've gone straight from school to going into this job search. If you've gone through a boot camp, that means you've done some kind of project. Leaning on that experience can help. If you have done some different work in your past and still have done projects, both the customer service related work you might have done before and your hands-on ability to use the technology is going to be what you should emphasize when you're talking about your experience. Now, another version of this question was, how do you help the hiring manager? So this is my abbreviation for hiring manager, HM. How do you help them see the value that you bring? Such a good question. There's a couple of things that I recommend. One is a question that you ask. So if you ask them about the role, say, what does a day in the life of someone in this role look like? When they describe it, that might trigger some memories for you on what you can do, and you can share that information with the hiring manager, and that could help them understand, listen, I may not have used or all the words that you use, but I know I can do the job because I've done something similar while I was at a boot camp or in my previous role, plus I went to a boot camp and deepened my skill set. The important thing is to take kind of like a consulting approach is how I would say it, because what you're trying to do is trying to understand what they need or what they think they need. But then also you're trying to say, hey, I can help and here's how. Another question that came through is, how do you approach companies when they may not have a job listed on the job board? And the short form answer is, well, to go to LinkedIn and search for them. They call that the hidden job market. So if you ever see an article that says, how do you tap into the hidden job market? Essentially what you're doing is you're going to a company, say you're going, for whatever reason, Google comes to mind. Say you're trying to get a job at Google, you just want to talk to somebody and see what's going on. So you identify which team it is you want to be a part of. You search for that team name in LinkedIn. Then you try to identify who the head of that team is. And that's when you get to reach out to them, introduce yourself, ask questions, and try to set up a time when you could chat. If you lean into that as far as market research, say it's like user research, you're asking questions about what do you need to do to prepare, how do you get to be ready, when are they planning on hiring? These are some of the questions you could be asking. And if they happen to be hiring soon and they really like what you had to present because you were ready to go, you had your portfolio and resume, then you might be in the top echelon of who they might consider for that project or that role. So I do have a longer form answer that I could share with you. At the end of all this presentation, I have a demonstration of how I walk through LinkedIn. So I'd be happy to share that, and that could be sent to you afterwards. Now, when it comes to changing careers, such a broad question. That came up a couple of times. And so I'm going to quote my favorite TED Talk. It was very actionable. It's called Start With Why from Simon Sinek. So my advice to career changers is to start with your why. Why did you change careers? More so, like, why did you join UX design, for example? If you speak to that, then that's what could resonate with other people and the conversation could get going from there. And then when things get hard in your job search, you remember why you're doing all this. It's the creative outlet. It's the ability to have a dynamic role that's going to be very interesting. So these are some of the things that I would recommend. It could also help you make sense out of the rest of your career. So if you're mid-career and you're changing from one career to another, if you figure out your why from the first part of your career to the second part of your career, It's possible that maybe you're not really a career changer. You're just finding a different expression for the same thing, like problem solving and helping people to live their best life. This would be a great time to answer any additional questions that you might have. So I changed the name. Nobody freak out. This is my fun way to do demos is to say hire me. So I changed the name.
Right.
And essentially, if we're looking in that F formation, just sort of like the scanning was showing, then what the recruiter is really going to see is their profile, their name, their title, their achievements, and their skills. And then they may come over here, look at the history, and they may come in here. But you notice what's missing?
Mm-hmm.
The contact information is at the bottom right-hand corner.
Oh.
I removed it for the sake of the demo. But if the most important part is on the left margin, and along the top, they're not going to really see the contact information. And the key thing is you want them to call you.
So that should be right up top.
Somewhere at the top corner, this top left, since we generally read left to right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a data science project where it shows that this is the prime real estate. If they don't look anywhere else, they're really going to look at this top left corner and then move on.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, one of the other things I wanted to show the results of a job scan. Let's see if I can change screens. Are you able to see this?
Yes, we're able to see that.
Sweet. Okay, so I went ahead and I scanned a document. I scanned a resume. And only some of this stuff do I find useful, but let me point out. So it says 80% is the ideal level that they want you to get at. There's some key other factors I think that come into play. This resume did not actually rank that high, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So some key things that this site will tell you is the job title match. So this is what I was referring to before. It will tell you if you've got a senior job and a junior resume.
Mm-hmm. Right, look at the images.
Yeah, you're able to see it?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, so the job title match is there. It will tell you some skills, and this is the free version. So free is always in budget,
Yes.
so that's important to see.
Yeah, look here.
Here's the junior role right here.
Here is exactly the same.
Okay,
Mhm.
and then here are some skills. So in this case, design is counted twice. The more times a word, especially if it's important to the recruiter, is used in a document, the more weight it carries. So knowing what your keywords are going to be important. If you're going for a UI job, this resume didn't have UI really in there, but UX was mentioned once. So that's an example of what a scan will do for you and why keywords matter. It does break it down into soft skills. And so it recognized time management, collaboration, communication. So I use that same job description that we looked at before.
Mm-hmm. So Tiffany, is it a good thing to have your keywords repeated many times within the resume?
Excellent
or just once is enough?
question. Once can be enough, but the more times it is repeated, especially if it's authentically repeated, like it's not just like cut and paste,
Mm-hmm.
It will carry more weight. So, for example, design in this case was used twice in the resume. It's 8 times in the job description. So that indicates that it's important to them.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't necessarily have to go through a scan. So say you ran out of scans for the month because that's how it judges it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I might come over to, here's another resume, also blocked out information.
Mhm.
So I could search design and find it and see how many times I find it in the document.
Mhm.
So that's my cheat for if you don't want to scan or you've run out of scans. If you could search your PDF or your document and find the word, then chances are the computer can find it as well.
Got it. That's great. I don't see any participant reactions with virtual hands come up. So if anybody has any questions, you can raise your virtual hand and then I can unmute you and you can ask a question. I think we have just about 5 minutes. But I think they've increased time here. So if anybody else. So anyway, so if that's the case, then if nobody has any questions, should we call this a...
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, ladies. I'm so sorry for, I don't know. I was looking for the button to push the raise hand. I couldn't for the last 5 minutes. So sorry for keeping you late.
That's okay.
My question is for the resume. My resume is 1 page only. And I want to make sure that I leave white space so it doesn't bother the hiring manager. But how can you? I'm a little bit struggling of including all the information necessary, but in the same time I don't want to make it very crowded and ugly to look at. Is there like a middle ground, middle way, or like a happy medium?
That's a great question. I do think your instincts are spot on. You do need it to breathe. Otherwise, it's going to just make them tired to look at it. And they're going to judge it like they're going to judge the design of the resume like they would the rest of your designs. So even though you have it to 1 page, you can go to 1.5 to 2 pages. But definitely don't go beyond 2 pages. So if you have a lot of content and it won't fit on 1 page, you can go to 1.5 to 2 pages.
Uh-huh.
If you want to keep it to 1 page, just it's easier to do, then you have to look at the relevancy of the content that you have there. So part of what some people are doing is the 2-column resume because I think you can fit more on there. So as long as it works well with the ATS, I think you should be fine.
Awesome. Great. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your question, Imad. Anybody else has any questions? The last 2 minutes?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Nice to meet
perfect.
you.
Thank you very much for this great event, and I really need it because I've been out of job for a few months and studying UX. My question is, I've got 2 years of research back in 2011 and 12, 13, and then since then I've been doing marketing, starting from executive to director. Then I don't know how much of that information I should include in my CV, because if I'm going to start with UX design, I understand I can explain about my transferable skills and just list, for example, research, quantitative, qualitative, or mentioning about, running surveys, interviews, and stakeholder management, because these are the things I've already done. I can explain that, but how much of my past experience physically should be in there, like about a 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs, or does it need to be there? How much top level do I need to speak about it? Do I need to explain about any of the projects? Because my marketing experience is very specific in property marketing, and it's quite difficult to explain to people in just 1 paragraph.
Got it. So quite honestly, if it helps to explain that you can take on UX design roles, sort of like what you were laying out where you were doing surveys and research, then it should be on the resume because that helps to show that you have experience. As far as how much to do, one strategy, one cutoff that resume writers and agencies use is don't go beyond 15 years. That sounds like with 2011, 2012, you said that fits in the 15 years. So then the other thing to consider is because most resumes should be reverse chronological, your most recent role is at the top of the resume. So you could put the most content there and then increasingly use less and less content as you go farther back into your career. So for example, if I were to do 4 bullet points for my most recent job at the top of my resume, the next job can have 3 or 4, and then the jobs after that might have 3 or 2, and then so on and so forth. You do want to make sure that you use the most relevant examples for the job you're applying to. So you can have like a master resume with everything on it, but when it comes time to apply, you only have the stuff that's relevant for the job that you're applying to.
Thank you, everybody. And with that, I'll end the meeting. Thanks, Tiffany. I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.